Hi everybody, I'm Molly back from the Office of Postdoctoral Services, and Mrs. Kim. We are so happy to have Kim back. Kim left just on what month?
I left beginning of August.
Beginning of August. And before that, she was a lowly postdoc, just like many. Not all of you. How many postdocs do we have? Great. Any grad students? All right. Did anybody know Kim from our former department here? Like, okay, great. Well, without further ado, Kim is going to tell us all about how she has set up her new lab and all the triumphs and hopefully not too many pitfalls. So thank you for coming, Kim.
My pleasure. Thank you, Molly, for inviting me. It's great to be back in North Carolina. I'm actually here primarily because my former lab mate just successfully defended her PhD thesis. Super exciting. While I'm here, I was involved in DUPA with the Postdoc Council and did a little bit of programming. So I was asked by Molly if I would come let you guys know a bit about my experiences. So this is all done with the caveat that I'm only a few months into this and don't really know what I'm doing. So, but I can tell you how it's been going so far. I'm going to tell you about setting up my lab and getting my faculty position started at University of Denver. This presentation just comes with a quick disclaimer. Of course, this is based on my personal experiences and it doesn't reflect the official viewpoint of DU or any other institution. And of course, people's experiences can be really variable and they depend on a lot of different things. So any suggestions, recommendations, ways that I explain how I do things should be considered in the context of that this is one person's experience. As you go into a faculty position, this sort of illustrates a general point. It's really, really helpful to learn about different people's experiences and different perspectives. So this is just one person's, okay? Your mileage might vary. All right. So this is a little bit of an introduction to me and to my background. So I'm a cognitive psychologist and neuroscientist. I got my undergrad degree in neuroscience at the University of Toronto. I'm from Ontario, Canada originally. And then I went on and did a PhD in cognitive psychology at Washington University in St. Louis. And then after that, I came here to Duke, where I was a postdoc in the Center for Cognitive Neuroscience from 2013 to 2017. So I had about a 4-year postdoc. I just started this September, assistant professor position at University of Denver. So I went on the job market looking for positions at R1 and R2 institutions. We'll talk a little bit about institution and fit in a second. There I direct the DU Motivation, Affect, and Cognition Lab, which is at this website. And my research program, just really broadly, is investigating psychological and neural mechanisms of emotion and motivation cognition interactions in healthy human populations. I use a number of different approaches, including behavioral and psychophysiological measurements, functional neuroimaging or fMRI, as well as paper and pencil survey, traditional psychological approaches. So when I talk about setting up my lab, I know it's going to be different than a number of you in the audience who do wet lab biomedical research work. So there's also that caveat to keep in mind. I'm coming from this approach. So I am not going to be talking about my experiences on the job market itself, although if there are questions, I'm totally happy to field them. So I'm sort of starting from this as a starting point. You've earned this coveted faculty position, and then what happens next? So this is you going into the wardrobe to Narnia, obviously. And so the faculty position, you're moving, it's a big transition from a postdoc, from probably a primarily research-oriented role. Some of you might be doing some teaching as well, but there is a big cross-section of things that are part of my new job as junior faculty. So of course, research and getting my own independent research program off the ground is a big part of it. There's also teaching. I teach both undergrads and graduate students. Service to the department and the institution, mentoring, public communication of science, infrastructure wrangling. Any problem in the lab right now is my problem. Writing up your work, seeking funding is a big one. Personnel management. so on and so forth. Whoops. Okay, that's everything, at least for now. So there's a lot of these different roles, and I know that in a postdoc role, you do end up doing a lot of these, but when you're at the helm, one thing that's become really apparent to me is like how much you're switching between these different roles. And so that is like, I think probably the biggest thing keeping in mind as you make the transition. It's good to be, you're going to need to broaden out what you do. But that kept in mind, I try to keep this principle in mind, and so this is the chair of the department where I did my PhD at Washington University in St. Louis. Deanna Barch, this is her paraphrased. What she said to me going into a faculty position is that you can get really, really good at 1 to 2 things, and you should aim to be competent at the rest. So that doesn't mean you throw everything else under the bus, but just keep in mind that your abilities and your time are going to be at a premium, and you need to figure out how to prioritize. Deanna does a lot of things, including being chair of the psychology department, as well as co-investigator of the Human Connectome, which some of you might know if you're in neuroscience. She's generally superwoman, so this was interesting food for thought, because as far as I can tell, she's good at everything. But anyway, you have to prioritize and trying to decide where to spend your energy. A lot of that depends, to an extent, on the institution and department culture of where you're at. So this is something that I think you probably want to think about when you're on the market, where you're applying. I think sometimes the culture of academia can make us feel like we should be grateful for a tenure track job. I do think that organizations like the Office of Postdoc Services here does a really great job thinking about your different professional pathways and where you can take your expertise and qualifications. But think about where you see yourself being, what kind of institution, and then when you get there, understanding what it's like is going to, what the culture is like, what the expectations are like, what the performance profiles of your coworkers look like is going to help you understand where you should, where your priorities should lie. So these are just some questions that kind of, especially when I was on the interview circuit and then moving into my current position, understanding the environment that you're in is important, and it might be quite different from where you're at right now at Duke, at a big research powerhouse. So is the institution where you're employed, is it research oriented, is it teaching oriented, is it a R1, R2, so on and so forth. These are relevant questions for understanding the department culture of where you're at. Are you in an arts and sciences department? Are you in a medical school? These things also matter. More individually, you can think about, especially as you get there and get to know it a little bit better, what are the strengths of your institution, of the department specifically that you're in? How do they see themselves? That's actually really important in understanding where they want to go in the next few years with you as a member of the junior faculty. How do they see themselves? Where do they want to go? This is like really big picture, and it can be kind of abstract, but understanding those ideas as well as strategic plans can help you understand the culture of where you are and prioritize what you're doing accordingly. So I think that is actually really important. Part of that is, of course, as a tenure track junior faculty member, understanding explicit guidelines for promotion and tenure. Your department, when you get there, they should have some kind of written documentation. Tenure guidelines are infuriatingly ambiguous. Like, no one will tell you a number, right? The amount of grant money, the amount of papers. They're going to be like, well, we want proof that you're like actively engaged, which I don't know. It doesn't. So you sort of have to, this is where like understanding the culture can matter, because there's not necessarily going to be a quantifiable number. But some things to think about as you're starting that junior faculty position, you're moving towards tenure. You want to get tenure, right? So you want to like try to get the information that you can. Some other relevant parts of that include getting a pre-tenure performance evaluation, when you're at the interview stage, they probably will tell you about these things, and if not, you should ask. Do they have evaluations like annually? Do they have like a mid-tenure, like a 3-year review? They'll give you this kind of information. Another thing to think about as you're moving towards tenure is, do junior faculty serve on the promotion and tenure committee? So I was explicitly told at DU that they do. I'm not on it in my first year, but I can expect to be on it. I've been told anecdotally it's really helpful to see people go through that tenure process so that you understand what exactly it involves. Another thing to try to figure out what you need to do to get to tenure is looking at the track records of newly tenured faculty in your department. What do they look like? What is that relative to where you're at right now? And so how are you supposed to get there in the next few years? And so just like these pieces of information, like I said, it is going to be an individual trajectory for each person and for each person's research program. But understanding these things, they're going to be a little bit different from one institution to another, and they can help you triage and manage your time. Because there are going to be lots of these different hats you're going to need to wear and different, possibly competing priorities. So I put up University of Denver as just a case study. This is with the caveat that before I came to DU, I was at big R1 institutions pretty much my whole time. I was at a big public undergrad, a really big one. University of Toronto is about 45,000 students. WashU is quite a bit smaller, but it's still a very research-intensive private institution, followed by postdocing at Duke, which is also a very research-active private institution. So I'm at a smaller private university now. We're about 12,000 students. Half are undergrads, approximately half are grad students. So we do have a number of professional schools at DU, including a law school, business school, social work, engineering. But one thing we don't have is a medical school. And so that does, we have like a biology department, chemistry, we have some natural sciences. We have people doing neuroscience work in the psych department, but we don't have a med school and medical school collaborators. We're fortunate to be in a big metro area, so I do some collaboration work with people at University of Colorado and the Colorado Medical Center. But this is the first time I have not been at a place with a big medical center that's been part of the research landscape, so it does change things a little bit. DU is classified as an R2 institution, so its research output and infrastructure is smaller than Duke. It's quite a bit smaller than Duke. But being R2, they really try to, they see themselves and they pride themselves on kind of this dual focus on both research infrastructure and productivity as well as student experience. And so it's sort of in the middle. It's between like a really research productive R1 institution and like a smaller teaching undergrad oriented one. The class size does tend to be smaller than you see at big institutions like the one where I was an undergraduate. So the average class size is on the smaller end, but given that, the psychology department sees itself as, it prides itself on being one of the most research active departments in DU's arts and sciences, as well as one of the most successful in gaining external funding. So I've been told by my colleagues there, we see ourselves as an R1 department in an R2 school, whatever that means. Maybe the other departments don't like that, but it's kind of something for us to keep in mind. Like there is expectations for seeking and obtaining external funding and so on, especially because I do functional neuroimaging, some expensive work that needs ongoing support. This kind of information, as a trainee, I didn't really pay attention to the mission and vision of the department I was in. But like I said, this is, when you're at the junior faculty level, understanding the way the department sees itself is instructive. And so I kind of put up some information that our department had that gives you information about the way they see themselves and where they want to go. So their mission is to advance psychological science, generating and sharing new knowledge, collaborative scholarship, educating and mentoring student scholars, contributing to the public good. This point about the public good, it's also in the values, which you can see, as well as in the vision, this idea of inclusion or inclusive excellence. So this is something that I really liked about DU when I went to interview, and that I made a point of highlighting my own interests in the public good, in science communication and outreach. Different institutions will vary in how much they explicitly put that kind of info front and center. But DU is an institution that's kind of decided part of its focus is this public communication or public good. And so they have let me know explicitly that things like science communication and outreach and activities that promote diversity and inclusion do get explicitly weighted in considering people's tenure, which I really like. I was involved in a lot of outreach type activities as a trainee, and I enjoy the work. It often can be seen as like a side dish. It's still a side dish, but it's one that's like built into the vision here. So if you look at this kind of information, different departments will have different missions, values, visions, but it'll give you something to go on about the way that the department sees itself and where it wants to go. So that's kind of a quick look at our department. Getting more into specifics, something that of course is going to be really important for everybody starting a lab is understanding your funding needs and expectations. So this is something that I'm not necessarily going to be able to tell you about your specific research program unless it's in cognitive neuroscience and really similar to mine. But understanding what it's going to cost both to launch as well as to continue to sustain your research program is something that postdocs don't necessarily get a lot of explicit training in, even though if you get to the PI stage, it's something that you really, it really is important to know and understand. So these things are going to depend on a number of different things. You have a wet lab, a dry lab. You need to think about both like startup, putting together your infrastructure, as well as what it costs for ongoing operation. Thinking about personnel. So personnel is really expensive, which at the postdoc level you may not explicitly think about very much. You know, how are you going to pay the salaries for the people working under you? Particularly in a wet lab, having a technician is basically going to be a given for a lot of folks. It's not, we're kind of a dry lab, so we can kind of get away. I chose not to hire someone this year. We'll get into hiring in a little bit. But thinking about what do you need to do the work that you do on a day-to-day basis and make it sustainable. I'm happy to answer specific questions about how I went through the startup process, because that is something that you go through before you arrive and start your faculty position. But it's going to include things like what you need to get started, important things to think about as you think about what you're going to ask for and what you need is how long do you have to use your startup funds? 3 years seemed like a pretty typical one. I was fortunate to get a couple of offers, and both of them I was expected to ask for 3 years of support in my startup. But also, is there a no-cost extension possible? Everything takes longer than you think to get started. So can you use that money later than the 3-year mark? That matters. And then what is it going to cost to keep things rolling when the startup runs out? To an extent, especially if you're at a research-intensive institution, this is going to roll into the expectations for promotion and tenure. So basically a big question that you'll want to know starting at a new place is, do you need an R01 or equivalent to get tenure? Of course, that's also, do you need an R01 and the money that it brings to keep your program rolling, but do you need an R01 for tenure? So this is a point, of course, it's challenging to get grants in this climate. It's a source of a lot of anxiety for everybody. But if you need that, you need a plan to get there. So just as like a really quick example, you can kind of think about the pre-tenure period as you might go up for tenure in like year 5 or year 6. Your institution will be happy to field, they should be happy to field questions about the timeline of this. But thinking about getting to that mark where you're getting external funding and sustaining, you might be coming in with research support, for example, like K99, R00, as you transition to an independent position. But then you're going to want to be thinking about getting your lab off the ground, establishing yourself as an independent investigator, and of course getting data in place in order to construct that R01 application that is going to get you tenure and finish your transition. You might have a midterm review at year 3. We have an explicit one, and I think that's pretty typical. So it's meant, my understanding is that it's meant to give you a taste of what it's like to go up for tenure. You have to put together a package and explain what you've been doing. So by like the year 3 mark, your startup might be ending. The idea is that you've gotten your lab up and rolling. How are you going to fund? And then going into year 5, 6, 7, have you launched your lab? Have you shown that you can financially sustain your research program? Are your trainees producing work? Are you getting publications out as senior author? So these things all are really important, and so it goes really fast. Just thinking about if you need that R01, how are you going to get there? Everybody, you know, whether you're at a more or less research-intensive institution, is your lab getting up and rolling? Are you serving in the role of PI that you're supposed to be doing? So you kind of need to start thinking about this and mapping out how you're going to get there when you arrive. So if you don't need an R01 for tenure, putting all your energy into grant seeking may not necessarily be appropriate or necessary. So I want to have this caveat because at least I found a lot of resources geared at new faculty, particularly in the biomedical sciences. We're talking about basically putting in an R01 at every cycle, like multiple times a year. I know that for faculty on soft money or in like, I know that there is like a lot of expectation to do this, and if you're in like if you have a really expensive research program, it might be a necessity. But I've been trying to figure out this balance because I have a dry lab where I do a lot of behavioral work that's not that expensive, and also we're a less intensive research institution where there is also a lot of expectation that you're going to be doing high quality teaching. And so on, and so I've been explicitly told that they don't want me to spend all my time writing grants, which is really weird coming off of Duke. So again, nobody is going to like tell you exactly how you're supposed to allocate your time, and I think it is one of the things where it's hard to say that there's a right or a wrong answer, but again, it kind of goes back to understanding your institution and the culture, the track record of your colleagues, especially the ones who have been, you know, tenured recently, the ones who were tenured 30 years ago, it might be different. Understanding people's trajectories will help you kind of figure out how you can allocate your time, because all the time you spend writing grants is going to be time that you're not spending doing something else. Of course, be mindful that even in a less research-intensive department and institution, publications and funding are really quantifiable contributions towards showing that you've established that independent program and are able to be a freestanding independent investigator. So those are some things to think about. When I was leaving my postdoc at Duke and moving to a different environment, for me it's like very weird to not feel like I have to be writing grants nonstop, but it really, my colleagues have been, and my chair have been pretty explicit that that's not necessarily appropriate in the environment that we're in. So your mileage might vary. So the next thing I want to talk about is personnel, and so these are my guys. Are there any questions before I go into this next part of the talk? Okay. So this is my lab, and I'm going to be talking about personnel a fair bit because this is also something you don't get too much explicit training in at the postdoc level, although you can definitely get good experience mentoring and working with trainees. A good team is going to be necessary to getting your lab off the ground, and I really enjoy mentoring personally, and so this is one of the real pleasures of working in a position is having my work group to work with. But you don't really get, I didn't really get explicit training in management and mentoring as a postdoc, And then also as the PI, I'm responsible for making the recruitment and hiring decisions, and also, of course, paying my personnel. So now it's a little different than being a postdoc and having the money come from someone else. So it is a little daunting to think about. So having a good team and managing them well can make a big difference in the productivity as well as your enjoyment in the job. And so I don't have the answers or anything, but I'm trying with my own group. One resource I want to really highlight to you guys moving into this job is this. Has anyone seen this book before? Have people heard of this? A couple of you? So this is a resource from the Howard Hughes Medical Institute called Making the Right Moves. And it's available free as a PDF online. It's really helpful in thinking about the day-to-day management of a lab. And in particular, it's got a lot of good content on like the practical aspects of laboratory management as well as personnel management. So I do think that this is a good resource for you guys to check out. But I'm going to be talking about, with regards to personnel, I'm going to talk about recruitment first. And so as an early stage investigator, you have this problem. You're brand new, you need a good track record to attract good people, but to get a good track record, you need good people. So what are you going to do? You don't necessarily have a track record of mentoring, you don't have a string of successful grad students. So it's going to be it's just going to be more difficult for you to get talent. Your profile is going to be a little lower, you're not established. So you will still get people who want to work with you, but you might need to think about a few things and work a little harder to successfully recruit them to your group. Being a new investigator, it's important to keep in mind, even though you do have this challenge of not being established, that you do have other things to offer a potential trainee. And I think that this is sort of like soft skills work, but it does matter in trying to get people to come work with you. As a new faculty member, you're going to be able to offer more individualized attention and energy than someone who's been around for a while and has a big group. As a pre-tenure, as a junior faculty member, you're going to be really motivated to publish, which you can also note to your trainees. And additionally, they're going to have the opportunity to have a major impact on your lab. My lab right now is not that big. We're starting from the ground up. And so my students now have opportunities that they may not necessarily have in a big established lab. And so, these will also, for potential trainees, these are also definite benefits that can be kept in mind. Another thing that's really important from a practical funding point of view is the fact that you're not an island in your department. There's also going to be more senior colleagues there. And so when your trainees are seeking funding, I really recommend, what was recommended to me and what we've done is try to get a more senior established colleague on board, which if you're in a good, healthy department, your colleagues are going to want you to succeed. They're going to understand that when you're seeking funding, when your trainees are seeking funding, having a brand new investigator may be a liability. Having someone else on board to help steer the ship is really important. And I'm sure you guys have seen that in your own training fellowships and stuff. So what I did with regards to recruitment, this is a little different than what I might do if I was at an R1 or if I had a wet lab that needs a technician day-to-day, immediately. I spoke to my departmental colleagues about their hiring process beforehand, and I ultimately elected not to hire a lab manager for fall 2017. A big part of that is just I had a relatively limited amount of money for personnel. As part of my startup, I was given 2 years of lab manager salary at 50%, so a 20-hour-a-week position. And so trying to figure out how to use that mindfully, it seemed to me like I ultimately decided I wanted to have that person working when my studies were up and running, recruiting participants, as opposed to dealing with equipment and stuff. I thought that would be a better use of time. I'll talk about that a little bit more. So I chose, based on the fact that other colleagues had elected the same approach and felt happy with it, I was like, okay, I guess I won't have a lab manager. So this is different than I think a typical lab at Duke is going to be, or a number of wet labs, but it does kind of depend on where you're at. So kind of the timeline that we've gone through up to this spring is in the fall, I did get a number of undergraduate research students, which I'll talk about. I did in January recruit a lab manager who will be joining us in the fall. And then student recruitment, I have a PhD student who's going to be beginning this fall as well. So I'll tell you about getting those personnel, recruiting them and having them join the lab. A couple more logistics to think about with hiring is just one, as I said, what support do you have in your startup? At a big institution, you may have support to hire a postdoc out of the blocks with the idea that you're going to get external funding that will keep them going. What staff do you need? How much external funding do you need to keep them going? There are other pots of money for your trainees, especially for students. So there's other things to think about, like what support does the institution have at the postdoc level for grad students, for undergrads, and different departments also have different ways that they support their grad students. So they might be supported by external grants, or they might be supported by TA-ships, RA-ships. So knowing what is available institutionally to help support trainees and their time is valuable. A couple of more things to just think about. What do you need your personnel to do? What are the expectations for student mentoring? So there may be weaker or stronger expectations that you're going to be working with undergrads, giving them training and research. There's going to, if you have a graduate program at your institution, if there's a PhD program, there's usually going to be a pretty strong expectation that you're training students in research. And then just really generally thinking about what is your management and mentoring style. This is sort of, there's not really a right or wrong answer to this, but people work in different ways, and just understanding how you work with people. Are you like hands-on? Are you hands-off? You can think about how you're different from your advisor, but also what are your own strengths and weaknesses and preferences. Mentoring as a trainee is a good way to think about these things and try out different things without having a lot of money or tenure time riding on it. So that mentoring experience that you're getting now as a postdoc, it is really, I've found it to be really important as I move into the mentoring role. But just understanding yourself and how you work matters. A couple things more to be careful about is bias in hiring. So these things can happen without being aware of them. There are these studies that have been pretty interesting food for thought. It does seem like at the recruitment level, faculty are more likely to reply email inquiries from interested prospective grad students if their names present as Caucasian males versus all other demographic groups, which is a little depressing. And also, you might have seen this PNAS paper, faculty are more likely to consider a job application for a lab manager from a male versus female applicant, and also offer them a higher starting salary and more career mentoring. Both male and female faculty display these biases, and so as you are trying to recruit people, as you're responding to emails from people, you know, these are not necessarily going to be things that you're consciously aware of, but knowing there are those tendencies can help counteract them. So I want to put that in just so that when you're thinking about personnel, you know that those biases might be out there. So this is how I recruited prospective undergrads, and depending where you're at, you may be like bombarded by emails anyway, but if you're not, you can, one thing that's really important is, this seems like obvious, but anyway, setting up a lab web page, getting like good information about you and your research program, and letting people know that you're interested in recruiting trainees. Getting that up and rolling is important, and then it also became important for alerting prospective grad students. With regards to undergrads specifically, I looked in a number of different sources. I talked to my colleagues about how they got undergrads, which people by the time you're established, they might be like, well, they contacted me, but if you're brand new, you may want to post advertisements in your department. You may want to get recommendations for interested students. Like, just ask your colleagues, who have you gotten a prospective research assistant, like a student who wants to do research, in touch with you. You can talk to undergrad, you can make announcements in undergrad classes or honor society. Sometimes institutions will have research opportunity fairs for the undergrads where different labs go and they can learn about what they can work in. And then there's also work-study positions depending on your institution. So I have 4 undergrads right now, and these are the 2 approaches that I was able to successfully get them through. So I actually got a really good student through, I have an informal faculty mentor. She had gotten a student who was interested in getting involved in research and passed them along to me. I also went and talked to the undergrad psychology honor society, and talked to a couple of classes, and I got some inquiries that way. So just getting the word out will increase the pool of people who are potentially interested in working with you. So it's a good idea to think about these. Depending on your institution, they're not just going to show up on your doorstep. Recruiting prospective graduate students is probably one of the more nerve-wracking things I have done in the last 6 months at my job. Because there's a lot riding on it, we don't have a rotation model, so I know that's different than a lot of places. And so our students come in and they're immediately affiliated with a PI in a home lab. So I can't attest to how it's going to be. She's coming this fall, so hopefully everything's going to be all right. But I will tell you how I went about recruiting this student. And so on my webpage, I explicitly indicated that I was looking for a student for fall 2018. I asked students to contact me with their CV and their research interests so that we could discuss. And so I did receive a number of inquiries, and I spoke to the ones that seemed like a good potential fit. I suggested that we just chat on the telephone. And this was before the application deadline, which was December 1st. And so I spoke to probably 5 or 6 potential students just to like kind of recruit them, kind of get a read on what they're like and what they're into before receiving their formal application in December. So this is a lot of text, but this is what happened after application deadline. So I reviewed, and I just want to go through this because nobody told me how this was going to work, and so I just want to let you guys know how the experience was for me. After the deadline, we get access to the graduate applicants, and specifically, I get access to the ones for our sub-area. So psychology is where we are. We have, I'm faculty number 23. We have 23 faculty. We have 3 areas: clinical, developmental, and affect, social, and cognitive psychology. We're all kind of lumped. And so I get access. We have 6 people in my sub-area of the department, and we get access to all the applicants for that area. But I can't see all the clinical people and stuff. But I'm able to read all the grad applications, and so I looked through them with particular attention to the applicants that indicated me as a potential mentor. I was a little dismayed that not everyone I spoke to on the phone actually applied for the grad program, so maybe talking to me scared them, I don't know. But anyway, I went through these. Nobody gave me any kind of explicit guidelines on how to evaluate these potential grad students, which I think there is not any explicit guidelines out there. So this is a little daunting, especially if you don't have a rotation model, so you're having them come right away. So you're trying to figure out, and it's not really a scientific process. What I did is make a little spreadsheet where I included their numbers, their perceived research interests match, their research experience, and their skill set, so what they have coming into the lab, the general quality of their writing, which, from the statements, The statements are not as informative as I was hoping they would be, because I think I kind of forgot at that really junior level, people are, you know, what they know about the field is going to be pretty early, and their interests, most of them tend to be pretty general. But just, are they articulate? Are they able to talk about things in a clear way? As well as any other impressions or notables that I got while reading their application. So this was my super scientific way of vetting through the stack. And so what I did at this point was I identified about 10 people from that 90 to speak to on the telephone, thinking about who I wanted to bring in for in-person recruitment weekend. And so there was some overlap with the people I had spoken to before the application deadline, but there was also people who didn't contact me at all. And one thing I noted here is that if I could do it again, I would do it by Skype instead of telephone. I don't really like talking on the phone or on Skype, so this was a lot of speaking to strangers on the phone. But if I could have gotten them in person, even like remotely, I think it would have. It's sort of like an intuitive process. It's hard to quantify it, and I wish I had had that like face-to-face interaction. So for what it's worth. At the interview stage, you can certainly plan it out. So there are good interview questions available to ask. You also really want to think about, especially as a new faculty member, you are selling your lab and your program. And so you don't necessarily have the track record. You want to make it seem like your lab is somewhere people want to be. You want to brush up on program specs beforehand, which you may not know about if you're brand new. So things like funding, the way the grad program works, grad student outcomes. And you also want to be enthusiastic. You want people to be excited about coming to work for you. One thing that I think I wish I had done more is just sit and listen to what the students had to say. It's the tendency to want to go ahead and talk and tell them about what studies you want to do. It's very strong, and I totally fell prey to it. So try really hard to just sit there and let them talk, because that has important information for you. And so does the questions that they have for you. So you really want to think about these things and give them an opportunity to talk to you. We met as a sub-area to discuss the admissions process before the due date. We had X number of funded spots, which was less than the number of faculty we have. So we basically decided who got priority. I was told explicitly that as the brand new faculty member with no grad students, I got priority for one of those, but we had to basically decide who got the other funded slot. So we decided that as a group. And then after the applications, but before people got invited out, we sat down together to discuss them with the understanding that we had gone through this personal vetting process ourselves, however you want to do it, and identified our own personal front runners. And we identified who we want to fly out. When we had people come out, my expectations, I had spoken to them on the telephone, like I said, but my expectations that they understand, like that they have read my work and are able to articulate what interests them in this particular lab and program, my expectations were higher. And this was also an opportunity to get colleagues as well as trainees' opinions about the recruits. So our program, we get feedback from everybody and look at the feedback as a group. One thing that I think I was surprised about is how some of the recruits did not seem to really have a good sense of how grad school works and expectations for what you're studying versus what the PI's research program is. So this was like one thing I tried to think about. But also on the flip side, it's important for your recruits to get a sense of you as a mentor. And so one thing, my colleague recommended this approach to me, and hopefully it helped. My incoming student, to make her decision, is I asked my Duke mentees, so I have some undergrads here, who I asked basically, would you be willing to speak to my candidates and give them your perspectives on working with me one-on-one. I also asked a couple of the grad students in my old lab who I collaborate with if they would give their feedback. And so that's just, I was like, here's information from a student who's been working with me for 2.5 years. She can hopefully give you some info about what it's like under my mentoring. And so that information, it seemed helpful to be able to offer that to the candidates. And then also as you're deciding who to give an offer to, and I know that this may not apply for rotation, it's just like what is their follow-up like? Are they interested? Are they emailing you for thank yous? Are they like emailing you about your papers? This can tell you a lot about whether you want to use funded spots are limited. Do you want to use it on this student? There's also like a time game here because good candidates are going to have other grad schools that they have options for. So thinking about follow-up matters. With a lab manager, this is the caveat, I didn't actually go through a full recruitment search. So as I said before, the startup that our department offers incoming faculty is 50% of a lab manager time, so 20 hours a week for 2 years. And so what I ultimately decided to do was hold off from year 1 and wait for year 2. We have another faculty hire who's coming in. She's also an experimental psychologist, but she's social psychologist. She has an undergrad who's been working with her for the past 3 years, and she also has a 50% support in her startup. So we put them together so we could offer a 40-hour-a-week position. Thinking that it might be better than having someone who's juggling 20 hours here with like some other job somewhere else. We can work together to divvy up the time without worrying about commutes and stuff. And then also who you can recruit for a full-time position. It might be, someone who's like looking to go to grad school and stuff as opposed to someone who's doing it on the side with, with studies and somewhere else. So I was pretty motivated to make this full-time position work. But I did review this guy's CV as well as do a phone interview and ultimately offered him a position. So he hasn't come yet, so I'm not sure how it's going to work out, but that's how I got my lab manager. Thinking about onboarding, now is the time to set up a good foundation. So things are new. It's basically up to you. So you can decide, you tell your students how you want the rules to be. So I put together a lab manual and like walked through it with my incoming students. I told them it's like a syllabus for a course. The hope is that this like sets down expectations that will help the lab run smoothly and well. So I made a little mission statement and goals. I set out expectations and responsibilities for the trainees and PI to each other. I have a code of conduct, which is fairly extensive. I've been in a lab where we needed one of these and did not have one. So I think I really wanted those ground rules. Another thing is that we work with human participants, and so I wanted to include just etiquette guidelines for working with participants, dress code, and then some day-to-day stuff, some info on lab security, resource sharing and scheduling, data archiving, and a little blurb about here's why we care about having good archiving. One reason is making our data open and open science. And I'm trying to head off problems before they begin. My hope is that if these expectations are really clear, then it's not personal. If you tell an experimenter you need to dress differently, it's an awkward conversation. But if you make it really clear what you expect people to dress like when they're working with the public, I'm hoping that it's more transparent and runs smoother. So this is just some lab goals from my lab manual. So I was trying to think about what I really want the lab to be and where I want it to go. And so I just realized these are all 1, 1, 1, 1. So anyway, our goals are relating to research, communication, training, and then environment of mutual respect. And numerical order is not on there, so. Anyway, but I'm happy to share these resources if people are interested. With regards to project management, right now I only have undergrads, so my lab manager and PhD student are coming this summer. The policy that I had, which I started as a postdoc, is basically to have people start on a volunteer basis, and then it's sort of I let them know I can be more flexible, like I don't expect them to be in the lab that much. I started doing this because it seems relatively standard to tell undergrads the expectation is 8 to 10 hours a week, and then they never actually are in the lab for 8 to 10 hours a week. So I told them that I expected about 5 hours, but I know that they're not doing it for pay at this point, so I'm like, I can be more flexible with you. The idea is that we'll see if it's a good fit on both ends. This also gives me a chance to basically have a trial period with them. Are they responsible? Are they intrinsically motivated in the topic? If it's a good match for both of us, I let them know ahead of time that we'll evaluate at the end of the term. And if it's a good match, then they can continue in the lab as either for credit or for pay. And then I let them know that at that point I do have higher expectations for their time and their commitment. And for the ones doing a credit, they have to produce a term paper. And then my student who's finishing this spring, she's going to be in the undergrad poster fair. So it kind of gives them a mini research experience. I'm trying to get my students to use Trello. They don't want to. It's kind of hard to make people do exactly what you want, so we're working on it. There are other tools that you can think of for project management. So I use Evernote a lot for myself and have heard of using it for a shared access lab notebook. I haven't done that, but I'm thinking about it. Just to try to keep things organized. And then we have a group lab meeting once a week, as well as I meet with my students one-on-one. So the undergrads are like, it's kind of working for them like mini grad students now. I'm able to give them a lot of time because I don't have the big lab, but that's what I'm doing with them. There are a lot of complexities to personal management besides what I just walked through with this. So this book is another helpful resource at the helm. And so both this and Making the Right Moves will have quite a bit more content on dealing with personnel as well as like the different situations that can come up. Yeah, management is, I'm not an expert or anything, but it's become really salient that good management can really make or break how a lab works. So this is something that I'm quite interested in and hope to do a good job in. One thing that's kind of funny that I didn't think about as a postdoc and then as a PI, you're the one in power. So like your comments and actions can have a really big impact on your trainees. Like I will make a comment that I don't think that much about, and then my undergrad like looks devastated. And and then if I think back to my own experiences at undergrad, it does. Or, the PI is the one in power. So you may not feel like you're I don't feel like a particularly authoritative figure, but be compassionate to your trainees because you're the one in charge. They're expecting you to be the authority. So, just going through budgeting. Right now, my lab expenses are coming out of startup. I have 3 years of expenses, and we can talk about this a little bit more. As I put together my startup, probably the most important thing was looking at recent examples from peers who started a faculty job recently and who do the same kind of work as I do. I also got my mentors to weigh in, but that was after I had constructed what I think I need for 3 years based on examples from others who have a similar lab and similar research focus. This is the time to really be realistic. Things cost more than you think they will, but you also need to be realistic about what your institution can afford. So if you get an offer from Duke, the budget's going to be different than the budget at University of Denver. So don't ask for $2 million when you're at a small institution or something. One thing that is helpful is talking to your future colleagues about their process in the startup. I found nobody wants to give you exact numbers, so there's sort of a diplomatic approach to it, but ask them open-ended questions and see what they tell you about both the way that they decided what they need and how they went about asking for it from the institution. It is going to depend on a lot of things about the financial health of the university that year, the equipment you need. So people aren't necessarily going to give you numbers, but they can give you information about how they navigated. Asking that diplomatically is good. Expect the unexpected. Things go wrong. Things are going to cost more money. Like, there's going to be some problem, probably multiple problems. So one thing that I try to do based on a friend and former colleague who started a faculty position a couple of years before me is pay attention to the potential lab space when you're on interview. What does it need? I still miss the fact that the flooring had to be replaced, and so that was kind of an unexpected expense. So try to build some cushioning into your startup, and as well as your mental timeline of how long you think things are supposed to take for unexpected issues, because they're going to pop up. Another issue is when will you actually get access to your funds, because that will help. I was keen to get started in the summer. I ultimately realized I was told I could not access my funds until my official start date, September 1st. So I didn't actually leave Duke till beginning of August, partially because I couldn't buy things and get going. My budgeting is, this is just the truth. I'm not that good about. I keep tracking Excel. But right now my expenses are not that complicated. I don't have a wet lab with ongoing consumption of expendables, and right now I don't have external grants that are billing different salary, like personnel salary and supplies to different things. So I am in the process of seeking external funding quite a bit right now. As different things get billed to different grants, I'll probably need a different system than just winging it in Excel. But I'm not able to really speak to what budget software is working for me because I don't use anything more complicated. There are things to think about with equipment, new or used. Most of the time, you're going to need things new. There may be shared resources in your department as well, depending what you're doing. I bought a whole bunch of things new. Part of that is there's warranties, there's technical support. You're buying a big bunch of things at once, and the vendors will be really excited to talk to you and sell you lots of things. So you may get a deal for getting a lot of stuff at once. This is where talking to friends and colleagues who have set up recently can also be helpful. But there are also some things that you may want to get used, especially when you contemplate that your budget number is going to run down faster than you think. I got some stuff from the lab of a retiring faculty member. I know that there are various other forms of MacGyvering. You can get creative. So I did get some stuff from a previous lab, and I also inherited, at this point, all of the lab furniture from elsewhere in the department. So kind of talk to the admin in your department, see what's out there. You may not have to you may not have to buy everything new, and you probably don't want to. You may also be able to coordinate with colleagues. So for some things, so University of Denver does not have the Duke umbrella institutional license, so take advantage of it before you leave. We do not have an institutional license for MATLAB, but I was buying about 6 licenses at once, and then I partnered up with a colleague who also needed to buy a bunch, and so we got a bit of a bulk discount for coordinating together on the software. Okay, so who do you go to for help? Your department is going to, a lot of these things there's not necessarily going to be explicit instruction about, but probing for where you can get guidance and ask questions is appropriate, and there should be resources out there to help you. This is kind of a diplomatic way of saying, who do I go to when I don't know what to, what can you tell me about institutional and department support for junior faculty? And a lot of the time, if you're on interview, they want you to want to work for them. They're going to be eager to tell you about what's out there available to help you. So keep that information in mind. It is going to vary a little bit from one institution to another. At the beginning of the academic year, there's like a million meet and greets to go to, but you should go to them because as someone new to the institution, these people and offices all have useful information and support for you, and it's just helpful to talk to them face to face and get a name to it on both sides. So you want to have a chance to meet the IRB personnel, the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs, who's going to be helping you with grants, Teaching Center, Research Center, the librarians, so on and so forth. There's a lot of things to go to, but it's just good to kind of help you get situated and realize what's out there when you're learning the ropes at a new place. Another thing, this is sort of obvious, but it does really matter day to day, is that you will be depending on administrative support a lot, especially as you're trying to get all your equipment and practicalities sorted. So be nice to everybody. You'll be asking them for a lot of help. The department staff, IT, facilities, machine shop, or facilities, whoever you depend on, just be nice to everybody. Yeah. You can, there's probably going to be formal mentoring programs for junior faculty in some shape or form. So at a large research institution like Duke, there might be an entire office dedicated to faculty mentoring, like there is in the School of Medicine here. Just as a side note, Duke has really great professional development resources and support. So if you're a postdoc now, take advantage. I think that this is one of the things that Duke does really well, and I appreciated it in my postdoc experience. But smaller institutions don't have as much infrastructure, but they'll still have something. And so at DU, what we have is we have a formal mentor outside of our department, and the idea is that they'll be like, you'll hopefully feel more comfortable asking them questions if you know they're not evaluating your tenure portfolio. It's a little bit different because my mentor is in political science, so it is like, you know, she doesn't do experimental work. Sometimes it's a little tricky, but she still has, she had a lot of helpful feedback, and I still check in with her regularly. And then there's informal mentoring within the department, as well as division level programming, and then our dean has this like sit down with us, basically to see if things are going okay. Peers in your department are a really good resource, so go in, you know, don't be pushy on them, but keep in mind that your department's excited that you're here. You know, the recruitment process for faculty is intense on the back end too. They want you to succeed, hopefully. So, you know, reach out to your colleagues. Like I said, a lot of the time, just getting open-ended info from them can be really helpful. And one thing, talking to my colleagues, is that I found it quite interesting and useful to talk to students at different career stages. So just personally, I found it more helpful to talk to junior faculty about logistics and lab setup, because they went through it recently, as opposed to more senior faculty about personnel management and mentoring. They have more experience with that. But in general, people are going to have a useful experience, and talking to different people and getting different perspectives on the same issue is also helpful, because people will go about things in different ways. You can figure out what works for you. Asking for help more broadly. There are broader support networks and info for new faculty available online. One thing that's really helpful is connecting from your peers from grad school, your postdoc, your broader professional network, especially for those questions you may not want to ask people evaluating you for tenure. There's also lots of professional development support through, depending on the professional organizations in your field. Society for Neuroscience, for example, for us, has a lot of stuff. I think American Society for Cell Bio's got things. There are also organizations like the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity, which in particular has a lot of support for faculty members who might be a minority or underrepresented group. The new PI Slack is a Slack channel dedicated to all things being a new PI. It tends to be focused on cell bio and the biomedical sciences, but it's really helpful, and it's helpful to see people going through the same process as you. But it also is like a great resource to ask your questions to, get example documentation, so on and so forth. And then there are like some good blogs out there with useful info, including Tenure She Wrote, which is a female-oriented faculty blog, and the new PI sets up a lab. I just have a couple more slides left. I guess I'm running a little late, so this is a bit timely. Time management's worth another presentation in itself. I talked at the beginning about trying to figure out priorities for where you're at, so managing your time is of course part of that. The roles you need to play multiply. It's really different from a postdoc where you can do the deep dive into research. So it is like, I do miss that because there's a lot of other things you need to do as well. And so, I think I just have a couple of points here about time management. Like I said, there are many things you could say about it, but I really find that the soft skills matter a lot in my job. So traditional research training, a lot of it is about the hard skills. Those still matter, but just working with other people and figuring out how you do things is something that you may not be thinking about at the postdoc stage as much, and it's coming up in the forefront for me now a lot. I'm still my best research assistant. I can do things, but I don't always have the time to do them. So I really need to try to delegate and guide my trainees through doing the stuff that needs to happen. And effective management and mentoring in this role is a long-term investment. So being able to delegate and help your students do these things, it's good for them, and it's also good for your time efficiency, because you just don't have time to do everything in the lab. You don't. One thing that is really important that I'm still struggling with is protecting your writing time, and also related to that, avoiding task switching as much as you can. There's lots of meetings and like things you need to do. Like I try to stack them and leave blocks of time. There's only so much you can do that, but it is helpful. And then also, again, just kind of knowing yourself, what tasks can you do fresh and which ones you can do less fresh. And so these are sort of common sense things, but putting them in practice can be challenging. And then just a blurb, we're almost done. This is just sort of important things to keep in mind. It's a big transition. You may be relocating a long distance and starting somewhere new. So there's going to be all this life stuff as well as starting out your lab. You may have a family, you may have health issues, either your own or family members to consider. It's a busy job, but it's not the only thing you're going to be doing by a long shot. And so it really does matter investing time into getting used to your new place and making it feel like home. Hopefully this is for the long term, right? And so you want to invest in your health and happiness and your whole life, because you're not just a new faculty member, you're also a human being. And anyone that tells you otherwise is lying. It has to be sustainable. So all in all, I'm really happy at University of Denver, and I feel good about the balance that I feel really fortunate at the balance at the institution where I'm at, and I feel really lucky to be able to supervise my group. I'm excited to see where we're going to go and what's going to happen, and I'm excited to see how things evolve. So altogether, I still don't know what's going on, but that's research for you. So we got about 20 minutes for questions. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for your talk. Really enjoyed it and learned a lot from your experience. I had a question about recruiting graduate students, and I can't see the point that you make that it's hard and solved. It's not a very defined problem. But I was wondering, do you personally think those particular parameters are correlatable with people's success in grad school?
That's a good question. I know like some of them have been, some of them have actually been quantified and studied. So there's a lot of debate about like the GRE in particular and whether it's a helpful predictor. I don't have a definitive answer to this. I was told anecdotally that my department in particular likes to look at quantitative GRE scores because they've had some issues with people with low quant scores struggling with the stat sequence. I think like I was using it as one of the points to consider, even though I don't really like standardized test scores, just because it is like an easy rule of thumb for proxy. I was trying really hard to try to avoid like like someone worked with someone you recognize, and so therefore you're more positively inclined towards them. It's trying to get around that, but things like how good is their research experience, like how's their writing. It's hard to systematically quantify them. So I'm not sure I did the best job, but I'll tell you in a couple of years. So yeah, I mean, I guess things like the GPA and GRE you want to take with a grain of salt, but it also tells you something about how people are in a structured academic environment, which is not the same as research, but it's not completely unrelated either. Yeah.
So for your projects for your undergrads, are they working on similar projects, or are you diversifying to see like where you can get the best preliminary data?
So what I have had them do is, so when I started, I still had a bunch of logistics with my equipment, and so, like I didn't have my computer systems or anything. So I spoke to Duke IRB as well as Denver IRB and got permission to basically have the students start by analyzing data I brought with me from postdocs, so long as it was de-identified. But I made sure to talk to IRBs at both institutions before just like giving them access. And so I have two of my students right now. We've started collecting behavioral data, which the goal is for it to feed into 2 different grants that I want to write this upcoming year. One undergrad is working on a big data set that I had brought with me from Duke that I hope to start writing this summer, but that's not directly leading to a grant right now. And then my 4th undergrad is a computer science major who is not really interested in psychology in general. And so he's basically working both on helping set up the computer system. We spoke about it, and like I was like, I realized he wants to do a PhD in cybersecurity and stuff. And I was like, what experience can I give you that is helpful? And he's like, I would like to stay on like the analytical side of things. I don't necessarily care about the content. And I was like, that's fine, because he's actually like, his computer skills are quite good. I'm having him help with technical setup as well as figuring out this MATLAB toolbox that we hope to use with eye tracking data. So his work is not directly leading to like a project right now, but it'll hopefully be good support for other things. Yeah.
So with respect to time management, I've heard stories of new faculty being asked maybe to be on a number of committees and things like that.
Yeah.
And some people say it's really important to learn how to say no. So
Yeah.
how have you navigated the saying yes to everything to be like positive?
Oh, it's so hard.
And
You don't
say
want to say
no.
no. Like, yeah. You get there and like you really want to plead. It's a very natural tendency. I think so. Identifying who you can bounce those questions off of is important. So like I said, I have a mentor who's not in my department, and the DU set it up that way, so that you can ask someone who is not is not in the department. So I felt like the service has been okay for me, but I'd probably speak to her and see if she had advice. Going to the chair, depending how your chair is like, also maybe one way to diplomatically be like, hey, I need to say no, like, because at the beginning level, it's I would be very gun shy about just being like, I don't have time. Right. I don't know that you can diplomatically do that, but there are people you can talk to and be like, do you have advice on how I approach this, whatever? Yeah. And they might be able to kind of give you a diplomatic way to think about it. Yeah. Yeah.
So you said you had to replace the floor of the lab?
Yeah.
Like what? I mean, were they just like, oh, whoops, we forgot to put a floor in here?
It's not that big a deal. It just like the tiling had some like water damage at some point earlier, and like it was like rippling up, and it basically was like a tripping hazard, and also was kind of gross. And so I was a little annoyed because my understanding had been that the space was like ready to go, or like needed paint or something. But I ended up having to pay for new flooring in the student office space because there was this water damage and like tiling coming up. It didn't end up being a major expense, but it just like it's just like, you know, a few $1,000s that you're not expecting, and that because I tried in the startup, I really tried to like think of like everything I could think of, right? But I was not anticipating. It's not like replacing like the ceiling or like the walls or something. But yeah, it just, and another friend like a friend at another institution had to like get electrical wiring. She was the one who was like, look at what the lab is like. Because there was like, it was missing electrical outlets somewhere where she needed workstations, and putting in the wiring cost a lot, like more than the floor did.
So in retrospect, would your advice be like, go see it in person?
If you can. I mean, they will likely show you prospective space while you're on interview, but the problem when you're on interview is that you're really stressed out and you're not going to remember like, anything. One thing that is possible if you can't go before, I mean, and it's not necessarily, you're not necessarily going to go back before you have to write your startup request. One thing is potentially asking the admin assistant or something if they would take some photos of it for you, just like food for thought. One place where I did have an interview was like they were proposing major construction, like converting a classroom into lab space, which would have been a huge endeavor. And so like, if I had taken that job, probably figuring out how I wanted the classroom space to be divided up into offices and testing spaces, there might have been more to it, but I ended up not taking that opportunity. So, yeah. So the flooring thing is not that big a deal. It just like is an example of what can pop up. And, yeah.
I had a question about the title of your talk actually, the activity statement about firing people. I guess, do you have a particular set of, things in your mind that, would trigger such a thing? Or I guess when you have an undergrad, it's much easier because they're not as involved in the research, but what about grad students, postdocs, or that?
Right. So that's not, I have not had to fire someone yet. So that's not, I mean, fortunately I haven't had to do it. I do think like having these difficult conversations is an important part of management, and the urge is to avoid conflict, but that's not necessarily going to help you long term. So, I mean, one thing that I've tried to do is to make my expectations clear, make documentation about it. With the undergrads, I've found that having like this like volunteer period first is sort of helpful, and then I frame it as we'll see if it's a good match for both of us, which I do think is legit because undergrads aren't completely sure what direction they want to go and stuff. So we sort of like take stock after the term, and honestly, if like I'm not that happy with them, I'm not going to commit to giving them an independent study or a paid position. With regards to grad students and postdocs, there's a lot of conversation about this on new PI Slack and in some of the other personnel resources. New PI Slack is not open until you become a PI, just FYI. Like, I do think that having open, like making your expectations explicit and having conversations about them is hopefully, you want people to know whether the expectations are working out, whether things are going well. It's challenging because you can't really make people do what you hope you can't make the research do what you hope it will ever. But I think trying not to shy away from confrontation when it's necessary is important. But yeah, you're right. I haven't had to go through this process. So
Hopefully not.
I hope, but you know, it's you don't know what it's going to bring. So yeah, in labs where I have been a trainee and seen these things unfold, I think, just as a one person's opinion, I think avoiding the direct conversation about it is never, like, that's a problem. It's just going to make things worse. And also like dragging out, oftentimes you're going to be on like a renewable contract if you're a postdoc or something, right? So you may be like, well, after this, like, we're not going to renew. And that's sort of like a soft firing. So that's one way to do it. But like avoiding the problem altogether just makes it worse. So yeah. Yeah.
How did you choose this job over other offers?
So I only had two offers, and this one was desirable geographically. It also had close proximity to a major medical center, which the other one didn't. And also, I felt really lucky because I just really liked the vibe when I went. Like, I felt really good about the department and the people in it and the work they were doing and the balance. When I was applying for jobs, I only applied to R1 and R2. I decided that I was not interested in a teaching-oriented undergrad institution, so I did, like, I know people who like apply for everything in sight, and I'm not sure I would advocate for that approach, even though the job market is tough, because you do want a job that you would be happy with long term. But yeah, it was sort of a combination of geographical location, the feel of the department, and also proximity to colleagues in a medical school that really made DU a desirable place for me. Yeah. Yeah.
So the three of us are counselors in the Career Center, and I was just curious if you had kind of general advice for others in terms of just your overall search or even interview negotiation. What are your kind of like quick tips that you pass on to others?
So one thing is to like talk to as many of your friend colleagues who have been through the process as you can. I've really found it helpful to bounce things off of others. Usually people who have gone through the process know it's really challenging and are happy to give advice. So I was really grateful for that. Another thing is I actually explored non-academic options pretty extensively because it made me, the academic job market is so daunting that reminding yourself that your degree and qualifications are also useful elsewhere can help you feel good about, like, if it doesn't work out, I will still have like directions I can pursue. I think it also like helps you from like taking a job just because it's an academic position and think about one that's good for you. Another like more career-focused tip is I wrote a giant grant right before I went on the market. I wrote a K-99, and departments like that because it shows you're willing to like put in the legwork and produce a, you know, seek external funding, and also if you get it, or you're basically coming in with a research idea, like a multi-year project fully formed. So I turned it right around and applied for an R mechanism at NIH with it, which is like, you know, we just got scored, but like, you know, when you're on the job market, people they can see from that, I have thought about what I want to do in the next 3 to 5 years, and I've already put a lot of work into that thought process. So, so that was definitely beneficial. I'm not sure what else.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So related to that, you mean that even just going through the application process of like K-99, not even getting it, is also helpful?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. It was both helpful for me personally, like as a scientist, to like flesh out where I wanted to go long term, and then even though I didn't have like, you don't get the score, right, till spring, it still like showed the places I was interviewing that, one, I have some experience with large-scale grant writing, and two, I'm willing to put the work in, and yeah.
How do you communicate that you worked on write it in the cover letter or?
It was in the research statement, yeah. And I also, like, if you helped your PI with writing a grant, you can ask them to include it in your reference letter. I had helped with like a big center grant, my PI here at Duke, and I think I included that as well in the research statement. So yeah, so you can make sure to include that stuff.
Okay, so